little slow. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. Today, we have the co founder and CEO of Ampaire. It's an electrified airplane, hybrid airplane, amazing company, Kevin Noertker. And Kevin, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. You guys are very busy. I've been following you for about 2 years now. So,
Oh,
thank you.
thank you, Wendy. It's my
And
pleasure to be here. Really appreciate the invite.
of course, could you just, because we've all read up on your company. We're very impressed and amazed by everything you guys are doing, but that's not fair to the audience because this is their first time they've heard about you. So could you tell us why you started Ampaire, what you guys are doing, why it's so important, especially now?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. So at Ampaire, we're building aircraft that are cleaner, quieter, and a lot less costly to operate. They also happen to be hybrid electric and electric. So we are taking all of that amazing technology that has electrified ground transportation and applying those principles, concepts, and technologies into aviation. Taking a really practical approach. So our mission is to be the world's most trusted developer of practical, compelling electrified aircraft. So really trusted, practical, compelling. How do you do that with electric planes? These are the hard questions that we ask.
Oh, yeah.
Taking a practical approach means we've been upgrading planes. So taking existing planes that are already flying and pulling out the combustion systems, putting in our hybrid systems and flying those with airlines around the world, really proving the concept before launching our products into market in a few years. We've been working on this in Los Angeles for, gosh, it's a little over 5 years now. So
Wow.
Time goes by quickly.
You know, it's funny. I was talking to Joy and Joel earlier, and obviously you're a smart guy. Caltech, NASA JPL, Northrop Grumman. So you've got a pedigree behind you for being rather intelligent and a
Thank you.
very,
Thank you.
important in this industry. One thing I would, going from a combustion plane to an electric plane, there are many hurdles. And one of those I would think is weight, because batteries do way more. So how are you combating, getting, this is an airplane, it needs to get off the ground. So how are you working with getting that power thrust up so people can get from place to place and do everything, basically get rid of fuel?
Yeah, Wendy, you hit one of the major challenges right on the head there. It is the weight. And in fact, if you've ever worked on an aircraft development program, most of the challenge comes in weight with whatever systems you're working in. And for us, it's no different. The weight of the battery, that energy storage weight, is one of the major challenges standing in the path of electrified aviation. When you think about the energy density of a lithium-ion battery, call it a best-in-class battery there, compared to your standard aviation fuels, it seems like such a stretch that at a first glance you might say, oh, this is impossible. How could you possibly put that many batteries in a plane?
Yeah.
The reality is that though it's not as energy dense as the fuel, you could still have a really, really meaningful operation with an electric or hybrid electric plane. So I'll talk a little bit about how we're mitigating that particular risk. First and foremost at Ampaire, we're beginning with hybrid electric. If you think way back when, push yourself 25, 30 years back and think about ground transportation, there were some really cool projects that were fully electric, but the actual compelling products were hybrid initially.
Ah, yeah.
If you think about the products that eliminated the range anxiety, it gave you the opportunity to drive kind of as far as you needed to go without that limitation of only being able to drive around your block and then plug in again. Or similarly, when you think about the charging infrastructure for those batteries, right? You didn't have chargers at every corner back in the day, and you still, in many places around the country and world, you don't have ground charging. And in that case, similarly, you're able to mitigate the risk with the hybrid. So on the battery weight, by including a hybrid component, it means that we're able to use fuels, sustainable aviation fuels in many cases, to augment the electric. And it's almost like a peak shaving opportunity, a little bit different because planes and cars operate differently. But similarly, you're able to reduce the total amount of fuel used over the course of a mission while managing the battery energy density risk with the hybrids. The second is, working really, really hard to make the system as lightweight as possible while still being absolutely safe.
Absolutely. So I mean, full disclosure on my behalf, I've been fangirling you guys for a couple years now, and I've been following you closely. So one of the things that I found to be truly amazing is you're doing test runs in Hawaii,
It
and
is.
I kind of want to hop over to Hawaii now just so I can jump on a flight. So how are, obviously you guys are separating yourselves from the pack. You're doing things differently. Can you go into any detail how you are different from other people trying to do the same thing?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the mission of the company, right? And I said it earlier, those three keywords: trusted, practical, and compelling. Um, how do you build trust other than doing the deeds you say you'll do, right? About living up to your commitments, about demonstrating in the world, and working closely with those people that you say that you're going to serve, whether they're the airlines, the passengers, or the communities. So that's what we do, right? We believe that our developments are going to be more impactful, and ultimately we'll be able to develop even better and faster by doing these types of engagements with the end users. And so yes, late last year we deployed a plane out to Mokulele Airlines in Hawaii, and we were doing this hop on the island of Maui. So the island of Maui has two airports, one right there in the center where you'd fly, your major airline into, and the other one in a little town called Hana, which is way off in the corner. There's this treacherous and wonderful road that you can drive to get over to Hana,
Yeah.
and I highly recommend driving that road once because it's amazing. Maybe you have to drive back, but if you can fly, it's a beautiful, beautiful route. And instead of spending about 2.5 hours on the road, you'd spend about 15 to 20 minutes in the air. And so
Oh, I
these
want
are yeah, and so I did have the opportunity to fly in Hawaii there when we were deployed. And actually, so the plane it departed from Hawaii, came back, we upgraded it in California, we shifted off to the UK, and actually we've been flying with some airlines in the UK just this year as well. So
was
um,
that Scotland? Is
that
that when
was
you?
in, that's correct. So on
Hey,
that
I've been
plane,
fangirling for a while. I follow you guys.
So are you choosing destinations based on like where you're trying to settle where you want a vacation? That's really what I'm picking up here. Like,
the Maldives have some pretty good short haul flights.
I'm just saying it's a very odd coincidence. That's all.
Yeah, it is a wonderful coincidence. One of the things that's really interesting is that the regions where aviation is actually a lifeline, like really like a core necessity for these communities. Oftentimes they've got like geographically separated areas. So whether they're the islands in Hawaii or the islands in Orkney at the north of Scotland or the fjords of Norway, these are beautiful places where aviation is truly that lifeline for them. And yeah, it is sometimes nice to go visit. We joke about that internally as well.
I
But
mean,
what matters the most is that these communities, oftentimes aviation has been a part of these communities since for 100 years, and to hear that history and the way that they embrace the new opportunities that we're bringing is just so meaningful. So I'll have to say, actually, the community is even better than the sites are what I love meeting when I go.
And a
Oh,
lot of people don't understand that the cost efficiency, like let's say in Hawaii, of traveling from island to island is actually not that great, right? You can buy a ticket inner island and it can be just as much as going from California to one of the islands in Hawaii. So this might be an efficient and a green way to promote air travel and cohesiveness amongst the island. So I just think it's great.
business development.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Joy, you really hit an important point there, which is that when deployed, an electric vehicle, especially an electrified aircraft, because it's burning less fuel and will be able to reduce the maintenance costs of those engines, you're actually saving money compared to the combustion baseline of the plane. And because you're saving money, some of that savings will pass on to the customer in lower ticket prices, and will pass on to the customer in increased convenience because of more flights to more destinations. And so that convenience is really, really important about connecting communities in a sustainable way at price points that aren't just for, like, private business jet owners, but are actually for, like, the people who need to move their families or goods between, hard to reach places, and really have no alternative other than that inconvenient, 2.5 hour drive.
So when you talk about it's going to reduce like the cost, like what percentage of the cost are you talking about being able to reduce by going to the electric battery versus the combustible? Like, are we like 5, 10? Like what kind of what maintenance more or less? So hopefully that'll drive everything down.
Yeah. Well, for our launch products, we're targeting up to about 25% savings in the operation cost of these planes. And we get there really on two primary components. It's the direct fuel cost, because you're using electricity, which is less expensive than the fuel, and then the maintenance cost, especially the maintenance of the engine. Now, we do have battery replacements and upgrades over the life cycle. So when I talk about this up to 25% number, that is including all of the aspects that we anticipate being incurred. That when you think about it, an airline operating cost, they're spending like 30 to 45% of their total budget on fuel right now. And so if I'm able to significantly cut that fuel cost, that really helps their bottom line and again, builds out the convenience and benefits for the customers.
And are you working primarily with like the Cessna planes with the goal to get into the big commercial airlines? Like, is that kind of the trajectory that you're on right now?
Well, if you think about like island hopping to a lot of these underserved communities that really don't have any service, you're not going to be flying a 747 in there,
Well, of course.
right? You don't really need a plane that's that big. So the question, and this is it's an open question, and we're trying to answer it, is what size of plane do these communities need? If you've never had scheduled service into your town, and your town has 10,000, 20,000 people, how frequently do you really need? Do you need just medical service, 2 Mondays and Fridays? Do you need daily 1-day round trip? Do you need a bus route just cycling people between you and the big city where people work? These are open questions that have to be addressed per community, but that also drives the size of plane. So specific to your question, we are beginning with those Cessna planes, the Textron type planes. The one that we're flying right now that we've upgraded is a Cessna plane called the Cessna Skymaster, and that and then the one of the launch products that we're working on is also a Cessna plane called the Cessna Caravan.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So, of everything you guys have accomplished, which has been a lot, I mean, huge amount of accomplishments, what would you say is your proudest, greatest achievement that you've done so far?
Oh goodness. Honestly, I'd say building a team that I trust and believe can go get it done. And the team dynamic, I think, is personally. I mean, if this is a specific to me personally,
Yeah.
any founder of a company hopes that they can instill in their organization the values that are important, the mentality and approach that is efficient and effective. And really at Ampaire, people are taking to heart, our team takes to heart our mission so deeply. And that I have to say is incredibly, I mean, one of my proudest things. I was second to that, and very much specific to the organization, to see your plane fly for the very first time,
Oh, yeah.
to see its wheels take off, like leave the ground and then soar overhead. I mean, it's probably, I don't have children, but it's probably the feeling that you get when you see your child take a first step. Like it is, it literally brings a tear to your eye, and that is, it was just a truly magical moment. And luckily, we've had a few of those moments over the years as we've upgraded our various planes.
So
what are you planning on doing as far as, or where do you see your product fitting into anti-climate change and all of the stuff going on around climate change? Where do you see your product kind of fitting in? Do you guys have any kind of goals for where you want to help and attribute to alleviating the problem?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, aviation is a hard industry to crack, right? Like from as far as an emissions standpoint, right now it's between I think 2.5% and 3% of global emissions, global CO2 emissions, and it doesn't really have an at-scale sustainable solution yet. And so, business as usual is not going to get us there. We need a lot of solutions, right? It's a whole portfolio. Electrification, just one part of it. But if you're ever going to deploy new technology into aviation, it really begins in the smaller planes and then makes its way up to the bigger ones. And so we see that we're a critical a critical proof point for these sustainable low greenhouse gas emission solutions that can eventually scale into the mainstream, the larger planes. Those planes, the 737 type planes, could go into a sustainable configuration like a hybrid or maybe a hydrogen, and these things could come down in the longer run, but they really need to be proven now. So that's that's the big picture. On a very specific, every drop of fuel that we don't burn up in the atmosphere in an airplane is a benefit to ultimately to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, and we think that that's really important as well.
So as you start working with some like the more remote areas to get the air traffic in, how is it for getting, this is actually a question we got, what contingencies are being made for the availability of electricity in some of these more remote locations? And are you trying to get solar in there, geothermal? Like what, is this all the big umbrella to get the sustainability down?
Yeah, these kind of second layer and third layer questions are where it gets really interesting, right? Like we talk about serving remote communities that don't have air service. Do they even have an electric grid that can charge a plane, let alone a fleet of planes? Can they handle a supercharger? Right? I mean, these are the good questions. And the reality is with 5,000 airports across the United States, there are a lot of unique cases in where you have to go in and figure out, okay, what do you have? What do you need? And we trying to build the building blocks in order to provide them the tools to upgrade. So imagine if you're a small city and you're not just thinking about charging an electric vehicle, but you're thinking about the energy resiliency for your community. What happens when the power lines go down because of fires? What happens in all these other cases? You need resiliency in your community anyway. You need an upgraded grid. And so we think about how can we turn, for example, oftentimes public use lands like airports or at least government owned land, and use that as a hub for the energy resiliency of these communities, both for an energy storage, maybe for energy generation, like you mentioned, but then also as the hub for charging, whether it's the local fleet of ground vehicles or maybe someday the planes. But this is also why we decided to begin with hybrid. In fact, a type of hybrid which allows you, if needed, to operate without plugging in at every single location. And that means that when you're operating, you can actually fly to that remote location. And if they don't have a grid to charge the plane with, well, you can still fly the plane back. And that, anytime you're plugged in, you're saving more money, you're saving more fuel. So like the benefits are much greater when you're able to plug in, but we can still deliver meaningful positive impacts to communities, even if their grid doesn't have the capacity yet. And in this way, we can kind of iterate on this cycle, deploy a few planes in the hybrid non-plug-in. And then once you see it gain traction, you could start upgrading the infrastructure where it makes sense, really thoughtful about that investment, and then move forward from there. And we think that that's the most practical way to go about it.
I'm glad you mentioned positive impacts, because one of the big things with sustainability is something called positive externalities, which basically means, for people out there, something that someone else does that positively impacts you. So in the case for electric airplanes, you had mentioned reducing noise, reducing CO2 emissions, greenhouse gases. What other positive impacts are you guys doing? Bringing people together. I mean, that's the biggest one for this group, is community. But for you guys, what are the other ones I'm missing?
Yeah, I mean, well, you touched on some important ones, right? Like the noise factor is a huge one. You think about why communities are trying to shut down airports, and it happens pretty frequently. They're limiting the operations, and it's generally because of the noise. I mean, that's how you know a plane's flying overhead, right? You usually hear it first. And so by electrification can lead to much quieter planes, so that's a great benefit. But yeah, these externalities, these other things that we can do. So when you're increasing accessibility into a community, so ins and outs of that community at an affordable price, now all of a sudden you're giving each individual a larger kind of radius of their life. They can more easily get to, let's say, that big city. Maybe they can now pick up a job in that big city. And with COVID, we're all working from home, but eventually, what if we're in the office, 2 or 3 days a week and actually have to super commute from this small community where we've decided to live? A lot of people moved out of the big cities.
Oh
How
yeah.
are they going to get back in there? Do they really need to fly into the major airports? Well, that's probably not going to work. But what if they could fly a small commuter flight once or twice a week to get in, talk to the people they need in person in the office, and then to fly back? Like, that's never really happened before at any scale. And these are the types of opportunities that if you're able to give a competitive price point, that actually can open up. So now we are enabling not just people to move around, but think about the economic impact of allowing those individuals to move a little bit further away from that city center for those small communities, and the spending power of somebody with a higher salary living in those areas. You might have a really positive cycle of kind of growing and economic development, as well as every airport that we deliver to. There's going to be infrastructure that's required there. There are going to be jobs that are created,
Oh yeah.
and so you've got all these extra layers of positive impact.
Yeah, I know that in our district, Surf Air has been, at Hawthorne Airport, been very great neighbors. At first we thought there'd be like a lot of pushback with that little airport hub right there, but good neighbors, clean neighbors, safe neighbors. So you already have the infrastructure to be able to implement in a safe, clean, and semi-noise nuisance-less way. That just, really can be a great model for whether it's a small, island or island nation, or just back and forth to different hubs here in California. So you've already got a lot of it kind of down pat.
We do have the baseline drawn, and now it's just about growing to the full opportunity.
Speaking of growth, since we're coming up to our 30-minute mark, any new technology you can share, or growth, or things in the future that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm incredibly excited about the new technology that we're working on, whether it's the hybrid architectures that we're looking at, or the types of vehicles, the types of planes that'll get impacted. It's probably on a weekly basis, we get outreach from somebody who's got maybe it's an individual who says, "Hey, I've got a plane, can you electrify it?" Or from an airline or an airport saying, "Hey, we need help. We think we need an airline operating into our little regional airport, but we don't know how to start an airline. We don't know what the operation should look like." So those questions about, like, what should the solution be for these broader people, it requires this back end of knowledge of technology that is actually a lot more comprehensive than just the airplane. And that's getting me incredibly excited right now as I think about this. What can we do for the world around us? Of course, we can deliver planes, and we can deliver them with compelling performance. But well, I'm getting excited about these additional conversations where we're looking a little more holistically around, like, what is the solution we can provide that gets them a low cost to operate and sustainable airplane, helps them understand, here's the route structure you should fly and the number of planes and the types of planes that you should fly, or even says, here's how people in your community are currently moving around between between their homes where you are and the larger cities around. And here's a route structure and pricing point that actually fits with that. And, like, these are very complex questions and challenges to solve, but ones that require actually a lot of kind of like back end technology, and that are tremendously exciting. And then, of course, my team is working on advanced battery packs, energy storage, and we've got a plane that hopefully in a few months here is going to take its first flight, and that's always exciting. So we've got just a bunch of really exciting.
Maybe I'll be able to come out and film you.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
And you guys are growing. I believe you're hiring. You're expanding
aggressively.
Yeah.
And so I will say, if anybody is passionate about impacting the world in positive ways, electrification or aviation, reach out, send an email to talent@ampaire.com. Go to our website. We've got a lot of jobs up there. apply and let us know how passionate you are about what we're doing. We're growing the team pretty rapidly. We've already doubled in the last year. We'll probably double again going through this next year.
Wow.
Can you see the possible expansion of what you're doing being able to be used for other industries, whether it's auto or rail or just transportation in general? Is that kind of, do you see like collaborations there happening or the possibility for them, or?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of meaningful adjacencies, and you think about what you'd be able to do if you said this battery pack is safe enough to fly in a plane.
Right.
What else can you do that requires a safe battery pack? I think that's pretty interesting. There's also, of course, secondary uses. You know, when the batteries are no longer energy dense enough for the plane because they degrade over time. What about putting them into your ground storage or remote storage at these locations where second use of these products, right? Reuse is I think really important from an overall, you know, sustainability type thought process.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, there are these areas. You know, automotive requirements and aircraft requirements are sufficiently different that I doubt that our technology will go directly in there. But we're working closely with really around the same supply chain and players. And then I think that the last part that I just want to reiterate is, you know, think about the resiliency of those communities and the fact that by us starting the conversation around electrification hubs in places that really haven't ever had them, we might have these secondary benefits for the infrastructure of those communities, and that could be really meaningful.
That's awesome.
I'm always telling anyone I know in private equity, start investing in the infrastructure because this is happening rapidly and we need
Oh,
it.
it is.
Ready for it.
So Kevin, thank you guys so much.
Yes.
You guys are doing amazing things. I am looking forward to bringing communities together, the Ampaire planes, everything you guys are doing. Keep it up. And sooner or later, hopefully I'll be able to hop in one myself and jump around.
Looking forward to that.
I hate the big airports. I like the little ones.
It's a wonderful experience, and I recommend it for everybody. And eventually, we'll deliver it for everybody too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yes.
Everyone, take care. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you again soon.
Bye all.
Bye.